Yo, what up, a-holes? Thank you for tuning into the Holistic A-Hole podcast. My name is Eric Levi, and I'm the Holistic A-Hole, the mommy blogger with balls, the inconvenient truth of health. How's it going, everybody? Hope you're having a great day. Hope you're getting ready for your big Christmas. It's coming up in a couple days. Unless you've listened to this after Christmas, then I hope you had a great Christmas. I hope Santa brought you everything you asked for. I hope you're just happy because that's what we're doing this for, right? We're doing this for happiness, you know? And interesting that happiness is the topic of this next podcast that you're about to listen to here. I have my good buddy Brendan Eyre in good old Holistic A-Hole Studios here, where we're talking about mental health. As you'll hear on the podcast, Brendan has been through his a very intense mental health journey himself. I'm not going to spoil it for you here in the intro. You'll just have to listen to the podcast, but definitely opened my eyes. I will say that for sure, to a lot of to what it's like to go through the mental health system here, to go on a journey like he had. You know, it's very easy, being somebody who doesn't deal with mental health issues like myself, to almost trivialize, you know, what it's like to deal with depression and anxiety, and to go through the treatments involved, and to be on all these medications. It's very easy from the outside to just kind of say, "Oh, hey, it's easy to deal with this stuff. Just stop being sad, you know. Just eat more vegetables and feel better." And I'm definitely guilty of having that perspective. And talking to a dude like Brendan, who, you know, who, by the way, let me say, I've known Brendan for a while, you know, as far as a comedian goes. I never know that he was dealing with any of this. And then to hear what he's gone through in the last couple years, it was pretty amazing to me. And I've definitely kind of shifted my thought process on this, maybe to be a little bit more empathetic to the mental health community. Because it's intense, and my heart goes out to any of you a-holes who are dealing with this stuff. And I hope you really get a lot out of this next podcast, because Brendan came in and he was very open with this. You know, he didn't hold back anything. And he didn't have to, and I definitely thank him for that. He's very funny. You could see him on the set. He has a Seth Meyers stand-up set he has online. You can see him on Comedy Central. You can follow him at Eyre on Instagram and his Twitter. But definitely drop him a line if you like what you hear on this podcast, because like I said, it's not easy to just come up and just, you know, talk about this stuff in public. So I'm very excited for you guys to listen to this podcast today. Like I said, for me, it was intense. It was very eye-opening. But I think we had a very good, deep, interesting conversation. And then, of course, it ended with me talking about health stuff. But you guys will love it. So, before I send you off to the podcast, please, if it's your first time here, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. All you got to do is hit the little subscribe button right there in your phone. You know how to do this. You did all the work to get the podcast in your earbuds. Now just take that extra step and subscribe. That way you get the podcast when it pops up in your feed twice a week. And then if you love what you hear today, I do not doubt that you're not gonna love it. Does that make sense? I doubt that you're going to not like it. I think you're going to love this podcast. And what you need to do is, after you hear it, go on over to iTunes, leave the podcast a 5-star review. And if you can, please follow me on Instagram at Holistic A-Hole, Twitter at Holistic A-Hole. Go to my YouTube page, where there's new YouTube videos going up every single week, Holistic A-Hole. And sit back, relax. If you're on the treadmill, if you're lifting weights, if you're cooking, if you're just sitting there with your best girl or guy friend, if you're driving the kids to school, really enjoy this podcast, and I know you're going to. I'll catch you on the next one. Enjoy, everybody. All right, and we are live here in A-Hole Studios. I got hilarious comedian Brendan Eyre on with me. Brendan, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yep, thank you for coming up to A-Hole Studios here to talk about mental health.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. You've been through a mental health issue. Or
yes,
you're still going through?
my whole life. I guess I don't know if I'd call it an issue. I have I have a mental illness. I just always will, I guess.
Yeah. So right off the bat, it's like I don't even know how to address that
Right.
properly. Do you find that's like a common thing? Like people like typically don't know how to like talk to you about it or address it with you, or
Well, I didn't really until this past year or so. I mean, it was always a sort of minor part of my life from the time I was sort of diagnosed, which was in my late teens, until this year, and I'm now in my mid-30s. Until this year, when things sort of went off the rails and it became a major part of my life and a real disruption in my life. So I didn't really ever address it. Most people didn't know, that I guess I should probably clarify. I have 6 official diagnoses.
oh wow,
Which I think is kind of bogus. And my favorite doctor, who really has I credit with sort of curing me, he kind of thinks it's bogus as well. The official diagnoses that I have are major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, bipolar type 2, OCD, and borderline personality disorder.
wow,
So, like, the heavy hitter in there is probably bipolar type 2, because that's major depressive disorder and all the anxiety disorders can really take you out of your life. But I guess the bipolar, you get some psychotic aspects leaking in. And I really like the doctor that I trust the most is this old school guy, and he's kind of Freudian. That's like his training, and he was kind of like, that's ridiculous. You don't have 6. You don't have 6 sicknesses. You're one person. You have one illness that's a mix of things, and it's personal to you. It's not 6 separate quantifiable illnesses. It's one thing that we need to work on figuring out how to manage and live with and deal with.
sure. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I do want to talk about that before I get into all that, because it's a lot to get into.
It's a lot. Yeah.
I do want to mention you're a hilarious comedian.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Brendan's been on Comedy Central, the Adam Devine House Party,
Right.
and Seth Meyers
Seth
Late
Meyers,
Night.
yeah.
You travel the country doing comedy.
Yeah, I've been on the road a lot lately.
Yeah.
On the road a lot.
That's good. I mean, I think for mental health, for anybody, it's good to just get out of New York.
Yeah, New York grinds on me. It does. It's like there's parts of it I love, but I don't want to live here forever.
Yeah.
Man.
It's funny, man, because I'm having the same like realization. I've been here like 6 years now.
Yeah.
I don't know how long you've been here for.
Like 9.
Yeah.
I mean, that's less a year, because this past, I guess from about July to July, I was mostly either in a mental hospital or home in Cleveland with my family.
Yeah.
So I kind of missed a year of being here, but
Yeah.
9 years is how long when I moved here.
Yeah. It's a lot to deal with. I mean, I think initially when you get here, it's kind of like a honeymoon phase.
Right.
And it's a lot of like, it's cool. You're cool. Your friends think it's cool. Like, it's just, there's just a buzz about it. And the city has a
Right.
lot of energy.
Yeah.
But definitely, I mean, I've seen people, and not assuming this is what happened to you. I mean, you said you've dealt with this for your whole life, but
Yeah.
I've seen people come to New York and, develop certain personality issues or,
Sure.
things that, because there's pressure, there's, poverty, just what are you doing? It's a lot of questioning yourself here.
Sure, and there's like physical everyday things, like you're surrounded by noise and crowds, and that can be overwhelming to someone who has a mental illness or is kind of teetering on the edge of having, like, if people are just honking all the time and
Yeah.
you're packed on a train all the time and you feel like you can't get some space and relax, like it can be overwhelming. You know?
Yeah. That physical it's so you don't think about it until you're like in it, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like 9 a.m, if you're just going to work, you're not supposed to be that close to people.
Right. Yeah, there's no real, you never really, the parks are nice, you know.
Yeah, they are.
But the parks offer some sort of respite, but you're never just nice and quietly away from people. Even when you're in your apartment, you're like, you're aware that there's people on top of you and the side of you, and like it's weird. It's I don't know. It's not. I love New York for some reasons, and I hate it for other reasons.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'll live here forever.
Yeah, that's a good perspective to have, because I think for a while I was like, I'm gonna be here forever. Like, there's nothing that's gonna make me leave. And it's been really the last like year, especially with the subway, as jacked up as it's been like, you can't live like this.
Right.
You know?
Right.
You got to have some space. And I do think there is a lot to be said about that whole idea of like, so much coming at you at once. Like, the brain can only handle so much stuff, it's like a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
And I think at some point, you start to kind of have panic, you've got horns honking, you've got lights changing, you've got people yelling, you've got music, you've got,
right.
And then we come from like a species where our bodies are only still made to kind of like handle birds chirping, and like a babbling brook and stuff.
Right.
And then maybe like the threat is like a tiger, off in the distance.
Right. Yeah. It's, it becomes overwhelming. I get overwhelmed, and I deal with it mostly through physical activity. I find is my best defense against that type of overwhelming feeling. When the city pushes on me, when I start to get angry at a car horn, that's when I know it's like, okay, it's time to go to the gym, or like go to my jiu-jitsu class, or like go to some physical activity and kind of release some energy. Expend some energy. And that sort of, I guess, if you wanted to look at it from a evolutionary perspective, that's my body thinking it's fighting the problem, the fight or flight. If I'm on the treadmill, my body thinks I'm running away from that the tiger you described, which has become a honking horn.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. So do you find, because have you always been like into like working out, or is it something
I struggle with, I've always been a heavy exerciser or sports or athlete, and also a horrible eater.
Yeah.
So I just balance out at slightly chubby.
Boxy.
I really would like to get my eating. My New Year's like plan is to really be conscious of my eating and get that to a place where I'm feeling better. I'm also on some medications right now that are like really not good for my stomach, that are hurting my stomach. So I need to deal with that. And I spoke with, it's interesting, this is a holistic health podcast, because I spoke to a friend of mine who has kind of constant GI problems or stomach problems. And I don't know that this will be, I don't know if this is going to work for me, because my problems are caused specifically by these medicines that I take for my mental illness. But he was like, listen, unless you have ulcers or Crohn's or something easily diagnosable, he was like, an MD, a medical doctor, is not really the way to go with stomach problems. He was like, you need to find a holistic doctor, because unless something is easily diagnosable and identifiable, stomach stuff is really kind of a mystery. And so it's better to go to someone. He's had luck going to holistic people who can kind of, I don't know what they do. I haven't gone yet, but he says that's really the way to go for stomach.
They make
stuff.
you poop and they look at it, and then they put a little thing in it and they figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
There's some services that will have you poop and then send it in the mail,
Right.
which are which actually in New York is one of the only states you can't do that.
Really?
They have there's a service called Viome where you can poop basically like an envelope.
Yeah.
And then they have like some special equipment that they used in like some secret laboratory in New Mexico, and then they send you like a month later, like basically all the list of foods that you can eat and how much you can eat them.
Right.
But New York is a place where you actually can't do that. They don't let you have any independent testing, which is I only know this because I'm going through this right now because I'm trying to get that same testing.
Yeah.
Because the microbiome it's so crazy, like your gut health and everything.
Right.
And you're right, like you can't go to they know nothing about this.
Right.
You know what I mean? And even like the idea of like a holistic doctor, it's kind of a bag of worms where there are definitely some charlatans out there.
Oh yeah, of course.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And the functional doctors, I mean, they know that they're precious and they're very expensive.
Right.
So it's a really like hard place to be.
Right.
Where you're trying to like figure out your gut health.
Right.
Especially because it's so important.
Well, and it's so weird for me because I finally, after a year of essentially, basically what happened to me is I was on a very high dose of an antidepressant, and it was effective for me for 15 years. I lived a completely normal life. I was starting to feel a little depression leak into my life, and I went to see a new psychiatrist, and she was like horrified. She was like, I don't know who put you on a dose of this size. This is dangerous. This is crazy. I later found out that's absolutely was untrue. Just wasn't the case. That was like old studies had said that, and it was incorrect. So she took me off this medicine, and we were going to transition onto another medicine. Basically, what happened is I went off this medicine that had been working for me, and nothing else worked. And I went through a year of basically being a lab rat of, psychiatric medications and side effects, and nothing working, and my anxiety being off the charts. I couldn't leave the house. My depression being off the charts. My disease had gotten much worse during this period when I was medicated. In the background, it was getting worse and worse, but it was handled. So I was having breakdowns. There was psychotic aspects leaking in, which I had never had before, where you're like, kind of hearing things or seeing things and that sort of thing. And, so after basically a year of like failed medicine, failed attempts at medicine, I am now on a medication regimen that is working for me, except it makes my stomach fucking hurt all the time. Yeah. So it's like this horrible trade-off where it's like, I cured this year of hell, but now my stomach hurts all the time. And it's like a trade-off. It's like, I don't want to get off this medicine because it really is. And it's psychiatric stuff is so weird because I don't know if the medicine is helping me. I don't know if, like in the old days, before they really had psychiatric medication, oftentimes, except for schizophrenics who really don't get better, but oftentimes when they would just throw mental patients into an asylum, oftentimes someone would have a breakdown or a mental episode, and they would just get better in about a year to a year and a half. It was just a time thing. Mm-hmm. And it was just kind of a known thing among doctors of the time that after about a year and a half, most patients just sort of get better. So I don't know if that happened to me. I don't know if it's the medication. I don't know if I had shock treatment, mm-hmm. which I didn't think worked at the time. This was in this past spring. I didn't think that worked at the time, but maybe that is working. How
old were you when you first went on medication?
18.
So you were 18, and was it like noticeable that you had I guess some kind of mental
Yes, I was.
health issue?
What happened was I had a great life. I had friends. I had everything was good in my life, and I was suicidal. So it was like it was clear something was very wrong. You know, like because there were no aspects to my life that should have been causing that. It was I firmly believe that. I just have a chemical imbalance, or just as someone might be born with a problem in their ankle, or a problem in their gut, or a problem, with a dental problem. I think I was born with just predisposed to a chemical imbalance in my brain.
Sure. Did you always feel suicidal, like when you were a kid?
No, not growing up. I had a lot of anxiety issues growing up. A lot of anxiety issues.
And how did that like manifest?
So, before I have memories, my mom remembered that from a very young age I was obsessed with death and dying and afraid of people dying. I then became deathly afraid of peeing my pants, which was weird because I had never peed my pants. And so like from the age of like 7 to like 15, I had this like obsession with like, I don't want to go in like a friend's parents' car. I don't want to go on like the school bus trip. Like I was afraid that I was going to pee my pants, even though during that whole period or before I had never peed my pants.
Wow.
And it was just this cycle of like that was all I could think about. And so like I have that's where the OCD comes into it. I have weird sort of health OCD where I worry about like things being wrong with me, and it gets extremely obsessive and interferes with my life.
Like from a social aspect, or from just
for everything, from like I won't go out. I can't do anything. I won't go like I'll shut myself away in my apartment or in my parents' house or something, and like I've refused to leave.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
So like when I was a kid, this must have been like 4th grade. I can't give you the context of like what happened before, but I was in a class and we were doing some kind of like, one of those, what do you call it? Like musical chairs or something, one of those games, right?
Yeah.
And I just farted. And it wasn't like loud, it was like silent, but it smelled so bad to the point where people were like, it was like hilarious at first. And then it got really mean where kids were like, oh, this person needs to, I don't remember what was said exactly, but I went from like laughing to just feeling really bad because everyone somehow found out it was me.
Yeah.
And I just ran out of the classroom crying.
Right.
And that experience, like, it still hangs with me to this day.
Yeah, sure.
Which is weird because it's like you would think, oh, you just get over that. And it was like that. I can feel you on this kind of like anxiety thing because I feel like that in a way has affected my relationships or my ability to like be open with people.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I would also think about it all the time, like, oh, I don't want to be the kid again who farts in public.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's funny how like things that you kind of do as a kid or happen as a kid kind of like stay with you,
right,
up until like
absolutely.
your 30s.
And what's weird is like nothing really happened to me, and that's what was always so strange. Is like these things would manifest themselves. I think from me just thinking them up and thinking like, oh, that would be mortifying if I peed my pants, and then I would just start obsessing over it. Like it wasn't, there was no inciting incident, which was very strange. So, but yeah, really the depression is, I guess the anxiety, the depression, the whole thing together was, it's been a big part of my life for a long time. I think my healthiest years were from the time I was like 22. I think I finally got on like the right dose of antidepressants until this past year.
Which antidepressant?
It was Lexapro.
That's when you were 22.
That's when I was 22. So I think at 18 they started me on like Zoloft or something, or
Sure.
something similar. They're all kind of this more or less the same.
Right. Are those considered serotonin uptake? What's it? Reuptake inhibitors?
Yeah, SSRIs.
SSRI.
Yes. Yeah.
Those are. The more I kind of like learn about those, just the way that those work is pretty interesting. Like the idea that, you know, in your brain, the serotonin is supposed to go in and then eventually go out. But then that stuff like blocks the ability for it to be basically dumped out of your brain. And then it just like hangs there.
It's what concerns me. These drugs, they're a trade-off, right? Like, they're very scary. Mm-hmm. All of these psychiatric drugs are very scary because they're essentially doing things that they don't, the medical community doesn't fully understand. Mm-hmm. So, you know, like what you just said is essentially what they do, but they're not entirely sure the mechanism of how they do that. They're not entirely sure what the long-term effects of that are in terms of your brain's ability to produce serotonin. They're not entirely sure what else it might be happening with these drugs. You know, the amount of psychiatric drugs I've taken scares me. Mm-hmm. And but it's kind of like say you're drowning, right? And and the only option was like a life preserver that had like a piece of steak tied to it, and maybe a shark might come.
Right.
But you're drowning, so you're going to be like, well, give me the fucking life preserver anyway.
Right.
You know, like, so that's where I'm at. Is like, I take these drugs, and I'm very well aware that like there can be some pretty gnarly consequences. Like I had twice on antipsychotics, I had a side effect called akathisia, which is pretty much the worst. I wouldn't say the worst side effect. The worst side effect you can get is death. Plenty of medicines have a possible side effect
that's
of
pretty
death.
bad.
Yeah, but akathisia is one of the worst side effects to a medicine you can get. It comes with an extraordinarily high risk of suicide because most people don't realize they're having a side effect. I didn't. I just thought I was getting crazier. And it basically, it's very hard to describe the side effect. You feel tortured inside your own body. You feel like you have to escape your own body, and you can't stop moving, and you can't sleep. So basically, you pace around, and you rub your hands, and you kick your feet, and you feel tortured by being inside of your own body. It's a very odd. It's very hard to even describe. Even having gone through it twice, I can't really remember the feeling of it.
Yeah.
And it's called akathisia, and it's at one time I had it for 6 days. I didn't sleep. And this is sort of, I think, understandable but irresponsible. So the time I had it for 6 days, I didn't know what it was. I thought my anxiety was just getting worse and worse. And the doctors, they don't tell mental patients possible side effects. There's a very good reason for that, is because oftentimes, even non-mental patients, but particularly mental patients, will hear about side effects and then think they're having those side effects.
Right, just start doing it.
It manifests itself, you know, like like if doctors would prefer you not know about the side effects, so that if something happens, it's not created by your brain. It's actually happening.
That is crazy.
It's crazy, and it's like...
But it makes sense.
It does make sense. It's understandable,
Yeah.
but because you can really... You know, you can kind of create these things psychosomatically where you're like, oh, the side effect's a stomach ache? I have a stomach ache.
Absolutely.
You know, but when it's dangerous stuff like that, it's like, in hindsight, it's like, you got to fucking tell me about akathisia. Like, I'm just pacing the house, not able to sleep for 6 days, thinking I'm losing my mind, like suicidal. And like, it turns out I could have just stopped taking this pill you gave me, you know? Like,
I mean, that's the really fucked up thing about these drugs. Because really, you're the experiment.
Absolutely.
You're the experiment. I mean, they put these things out, and it's like the clinical trials they do on them. It's like they'll do a bunch of clinical trials,
Right.
and they'll publish the one that turned positive.
Yeah.
And the other 20 or 30 that didn't turn positive, they're like, well, we're not going to put that out.
Well, and they're also not, for the most part, there are some exceptions. For the most part, they're not particularly effective. They're better than a placebo, but slightly. Like they're not like antidepressants, particularly like benzodiazepines are a very effective drug. Those are anti-anxiety drugs. Those are your Xanax, your Klonopin, your Valium. But those are dangerous drugs.
Yeah.
Those are addicting drugs, and those are drugs that have some of the worst withdrawal in the world. I mean, you can die from withdrawing from Xanax or Valium or Klonopin or what else is there? I don't know. There's several benzodiazepines. Those are very effective drugs. If you have anxiety and someone gives you a proper dose of Xanax, you're not going to be nervous
right
anymore. Those drugs work. But antidepressants, even like the successful studies are like, these work for half the people. Work for 30% of the people. Like they're not particularly effective. The most effective treatment for depression is what I went through, which is ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, shock treatment, which is not. It really took a hit from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It's not as brutal as that movie makes it out to be, but they're very clear with you up front about the side effects and the dangers of ECT. It's a last ditch effort.
So how long does that last for?
So you mean how long is it effective? Or how long do you go through it?
How long do you go through it, and then how long is it effective?
So you go through it till it works. I stopped because I didn't think it was working. Now I think it may have actually worked and just been delayed. I had 17 sessions. You go Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They start you off. Unilateral, so they shock one side of your head. I should start with the history of it. It's kind of funny. The way they discovered that shock therapy is there was a French doctor, I think maybe in the 30s, maybe in the 20s even, that took care of epileptics. And he noted that whenever a patient of his had a major seizure, their mood was often elevated for months and months and months afterwards, and they didn't know why. They still don't know why, and so
their mood was elevated after the seizure.
After the seizure,
interesting.
Yes, so they would have a seizure, and then they would have these elevated moods for months, sometimes years, and so that's what led to electroconvulsive therapy. It's not the shock that does anything to you. The shock is just the easiest way they know to make a human have a seizure. So they're inducing a seizure.
Wow.
Yeah. So they're inducing a seizure in you. Now you don't actually seize because they put you're under anesthetic and muscle relaxant. So you don't actually seize, but you're having the equivalent of a seizure.
Sure.
So it starts with unilateral, one side of your head, which is considerably safer. That didn't work for me. So they go, this is more effective, but your memory is going to be very much affected if we move to bilateral. Do you want to move to bilateral, which is electrodes on both sides of your head? So I moved to bilateral, and it did. It wrecked my memory. My memory was really took a hit. There's a lot, and it's coming back, but it really erased a lot of memories and a lot of a lot of basic stuff like spelling, and then a lot of like chunks of my life that I just don't remember.
Wow.
And they tell you that ahead of time. They're very honest about it. It's really interesting because it's funny because it is sort of like it's practiced in hospitals, and it's done by MDs and everything, but there's something a little bit holistic about it, because it's like there's no pharmaceuticals. It's like, here's this old school thing. We're just going to put electricity on your brain and see what. But they're very honest. Like, if you ask them, like I asked the guy before it started, I said, walk me through how this works. And he said, I can't. He said, no one knows.
Yeah.
And he said, that's important to tell you going into this. It's got the best success rate of any major depression treatment. 75% of patients get better, but literally no one knows why it works.
I mean, it sounds like, it really, like, it's a shock to your nervous system. And I mean, that sort of thing can take a little while to manifest, like, outward.
Right.
You know what I mean? To where you actually feel like, oh, maybe like today I feel better.
Right.
And maybe it's not like right after, it's kind of like, it's like working out, but like you just got like 2 months of working out in one, like those little exercise belts they used to have. And, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm ripped now, you know? That's interesting. And it's interesting they still do it.
Well, it's funny because I'm doing a joke now where, like, because like literally everyone says, when I say I got it, everyone's like, I didn't think they still did that. Yeah. And I'm like, I hope they do. Because
you went to the right clinic.
Otherwise, I got pranked real bad. Yeah, it's really interesting because I, of course, read a lot. I was afraid to do it, and I read a lot before I did it. And I also, like, the funny thing about psychiatry and all of medicine, really, is like none of them agree on anything. Like, when I was in the mental hospital, I asked about it because none of these medicines were making me better. None of these therapies were making me better. And I asked my head doctor about it, and I said, what about ECT? I saw X. I saw him go through it, and he's a different man. He's recovered. And the doctor said, you're not your symptoms the way you are, you're not a great candidate for ECT. When I eventually got out, and I was no better really when I left the mental hospital, I was worse essentially. I then was seeing a different doctor. He suggested possibly ECT. I went and saw the head of the ECT program at the Cleveland Clinic, University Hospital in Cleveland, and he goes, you're an ideal candidate for ECT.
Wow.
So it's like, here's two very prestigious, very, like, well-trained, great doctors, both knowledgeable, smart guys. One says you're definitely not a candidate. One says you're an ideal candidate. So it's like, there's no medicine. It's like an art form. There's no definites in it, that's a little scary.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like lately I've been so just into nutrition and trying to like understand nutrition.
Yeah.
And, I was a vegan for a while because I was like, oh, all the vegan science is there. It's great for the earth and it's perfect for your body. But then there's this whole other, school of studies and evidence-based science that are like, you need animal fat, you need animal protein.
Right.
And, both sides are dug in, like, they're wrong. Their diet's going to cause you cancer. Their diet's going to cause you cancer. And I would imagine in mental health, it's probably even worse because the metrics to measure somebody, at least like if somebody eats like too much sugar and they get diabetes, you're like, well, we have for sure diabetes.
Right.
But like with mental health, it's like, okay, well, how do you feel?
It's all self-reporting, and it's self-reporting by crazy people.
Yeah.
Myself included. Like, you're asking me how I feel, and I'm like, I'm wigging out. So it's like, I'm just going to yell at you for a while.
And the problem is you seem totally normal.
Yeah. Well, now I am. Now I'm on whatever I'm on now. This is what I take now. I take lithium, which is like the granddaddy of like heavy hitters. Lithium is like, I avoided taking lithium for a long time. Lithium is a little scary.
Is lithium a neurotransmitter?
I don't know what it is. It's metal, is
Yeah,
what it is.
okay.
It's basically a metal. It's lithium carbonate salts is what you're taking.
Okay.
But it's really the only, not the only, but the primary effective treatment of schizophrenia. But it also works for sort of treatment. They find it to work for extremely treatment-resistant depression. You know, they just say, like, I don't know, you've tried every drug there is, try lithium. And that worked for me. So I'm taking lithium. I'm taking a brand new antidepressant called Trintellix, which this infuriates me because this is the drug companies do this bullshit where if I didn't have insurance, a month supply of Trintellix costs $1,000.
Yep.
$1,000. So they've essentially taken antidepressants, changed one molecule, you know, so they could re-up the patent, and then said it's $1,000 a month, which is, I mean, it's insane.
Yeah,
to me. It's
crazy.
insane to me. It should be illegal. And then I also take Klonopin, which was something that was a real struggle because I'm also an addict and an alcoholic. I've been sober since I was 23. I have a lot of alcoholism in my family. I have a lot of drug addiction in my past from a young age. So I resisted taking any benzodiazepine for a long time because it's dangerous as an addict because it's an abusable drug.
Of course.
You know, lithium, Trintellix, I could eat all of those as I want. I wouldn't get high. I might die or I might throw up, but I wouldn't get high. It wouldn't be nice. Klonopin, I could eat a bunch and get high. So that's a little bit of a danger, but I'm secure enough in my sobriety and, you know, been through enough that and talked to enough doctors that they're like, look, you know, if this is something that's allowing you to live a normal life and you're responsible and you're taking the prescribed amount, you need to stop fighting it. It's eventually, hopefully someday you won't have to take it, but right now you do. Your anxiety levels are off the charts, and so I take that, and I take it responsibly. I never abuse it. In fact, at the end of most months, I have more left over. But it does trouble me to be a person reliant on 3 psychiatric medications.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? It's not a great feeling, and it's also, you know, you get concerned about the long-term effects. I'm concerned, of course, I'm afraid about them stopping working. I'm concerned about, it's just not a great feeling. I'd rather would be healthy through eating right and exercising and you know, taking vitamins if I needed to. But I did all that, and it's like it didn't work. You know, it's kind of like, yeah, this is what's working for me now, so this is the reality I live in. You know, I'm not thrilled to be taking lithium, but I'm thrilled to be back doing comedy and back and out of the mental hospital and not suicidal.
Of course.
You know, so it's a trade-off.
Have you tried any of the CBD stuff or any of that?
No, I don't want to do that. To me that's too close to weed, even though I know it's not. I know you don't get high. I know it's just the fact that it's derived from marijuana just makes me feel too close to a relapse because I don't even smoke weed. I'm, you know, full sober, and I know, you know, from a logical standpoint, CBD, you know, is less close to a relapse than Klonopin is. Really, you know, Klonopin's an abusable drug, whereas CBD is not. But just from a gut feeling, I just am uncomfortable taking something derived from a drug that I abused for so long.
Right.
You know, which I don't know. That's just a personal
When
preference.
so have you done like any like meditation stuff or any of that sort of thing?
I've done a lot of meditation. I'm not good at it.
Most people aren't.
I've kind of settled on my meditation is running.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of zone out when I run. I run long distances and I zone out. And I find that to be, I know that's not true meditation, but I just tried, I would meditate every morning in the mental hospital. I would do guided meditation, and then I had meditation tapes, and I would do all these meditation. I just couldn't, I don't sit still well.
Yeah.
And I get very uncomfortable, and I just think, when is this going to be over? When is this going to be over? When is this going to,
Yeah.
And I think if I really pushed myself for years or a year to try it and practice it, I think maybe I could get there. But I find I get the same state of relaxed emptiness from running.
Yeah. I mean, that is a meditation, like what I mean, because I've been in a meditation for a couple of years now. Of course, living in New York is what made me do it, because I was, I didn't have any mental health issues, but I definitely was like, I'm going crazy. I'm definitely like getting angry, and anxiety was always my thing,
right.
But just kind of going through this journey of meditation, it is difficult, because that's the whole thing. It's like meditation. I mean, it's $1 billion industry.
Right.
But all you have to do is just sit there for 20 minutes and not think of anything.
Right.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult, especially, nowadays when, I mean, there's just a million things that are in your brain at once. For me, it's been breathing exercises.
Yeah.
That's kind of like chilled me, because I'm like more about how can I attack the nervous system, and yeah, it is kind of hard to be like, even the meditation tapes, like that's how I started too, was like the guided meditation podcasts and these things. And, I mean, everyone makes it seem so easy, but in the end, it's like, really, it's like what brings your mind into like thoughtlessness. And it's like, if it's running, for people, it's lifting weights, for there's people who meditate on the subway,
Right.
So it's like, yeah, it's a mixed bag when it comes to that.
Yeah. Man, I had this real turning point, and it was as I was starting to recover. Sort of this past summer is when I was sort of slowly starting to recover. Up until that point, I thought, I'm never going to get better. I'm going to live in my parents' attic as a shut-in. I'm afraid to go outside. And this past summer, I started to slowly get better. And I went out to dinner after a meeting. You're not supposed to say in public, but for my alcoholism and drug abuse, I go to a certain program that we don't name for purposes of the rules of the program. But I went out to dinner with several members of that fellowship after a meeting, and an Indian gentleman who's got like 40 years of sobriety or something crazy, and it's just very, very kind of quiet, but like whenever he says something, it's like really meaningful. And at dinner, he was like curious about my depression and what I'd been through, and he said that he found it to be a very distinctly American idea that we as humans should be happy all the time. And he was like, pretty much the whole rest of the world accepts the fact that life involves a lot of suffering. And then sometimes there's happy moments, and you cherish those happy moments, and then you go back to the suffering. Mm-hmm. And it was like this really deep thing where I was like, whoa, like here I am trying to like fight to be happy all the time. And he's telling me like, yeah, that's like fine, but that's a very American idea. Like many places in the world, people just accept life is very hard and involves a lot of work and suffering. And then sometimes there's like a nice meal that's happy, or sometimes you love a woman and that's happy, but like you cherish those moments and then like go back to being unhappy.
Yeah.
And it was like very interesting to me. I never really I never thought of it that way or considered it, and it helped me because I was like, oh yeah, I can be depressed, I can continue to be depressed, but take pieces of happiness where I find them, like, you know. And that at this point I was still somewhat stuck in my parents' house. Like I would go out to these meetings and I would go to my doctor's appointments, but like I started to like walk the dog in the park and be like, okay, that was happy, that was a good moment today, you know. And I would take these little moments of like niceness, and it kind of grew into more and more moments of niceness, and it was good.
Yeah. Small steps. I mean, you
Yeah.
can't just like beat it in one day.
Right.
Yeah, I did a meditation retreat actually in India like 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and that's like really what kind of started me like to kind of like calm my own nerves,
Yeah.
and to kind of like discuss, like that's where I've got my breathing exercises. I've been doing them pretty much every day for the last 2 years, and it's, I mean, just the dichotomy shift in my mind of stuff like that, where it's like yeah, you're not supposed to be happy, you're not supposed to suffer, but you can't let that suffering be who you are.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's probably like a Buddhism derived idea.
Yeah, I would think so.
Which is an interesting thing, because when you talk to people about something like Buddhism or meditation in the States, it's changing now, but that's like considered woo woo.
Right.
Right. That's
right.
like, oh, you know, that's not true. No, that stuff works.
Yeah.
And then you start getting this idea of like religion and how that kind of like undersets everything. And it is kind of like that things. And you see it like now, especially walking around New York, Christmas time, it's like everybody is supposed to be happy right now.
Right.
Right. Everybody's supposed to be in the spirit, and you got to go shopping, and you got to like go look at the lights, and you got to be with your family. And it's like, why is this time of year different from like April? You
Right,
know, why
right.
can't in April? Yeah. I'm just monotone. I'm just like set, you know, but now I'm supposed to be like happy. And it's like, what if I don't want to be happy?
Right.
Like, is that okay to just not be like exceptionally happy? What if I just kind of want to go about my business,
Right.
and not worry about like this ridiculous standard, especially with like social media, of like putting my business out there. And it's always
Right.
got to be like, everything's great. And it's like,
Sure.
we all know that's not true.
Yes.
You know, I think there was a lot of that societal pressure, like that guy described, you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
because this is really the country where it's like, you got to smile in every picture. We only
Right.
started smiling in pictures in like the 60s or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I mean, that alone, I mean, the fact that everybody's not going through like what you've gone through is,
Yeah.
is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I don't know. I'm just glad to be healthy again. It's also interesting, like, you know, this being a holistic medicine or holistic health podcast, I should mention, I think it's interesting that, so essentially, you know, I was in 2 like pretty rough psych wards following some incidents, and then I was eventually in, you know, what's considered probably one of the top 3 mental hospitals in the country, and I was there for 3 weeks, or excuse me, 3 months, almost 3 months. It's interesting that here's this place that is, you know, run by doctors, and it's considered essentially to be the best, one of the best, and a huge part of the curriculum there is meditation, is exercise, is diet, you know. So there's, yes, they are, you know, everyone there essentially is on drugs. There's no one that's not taking drugs, but they do recognize, you know, that these holistic methods are just as important, if not more important. You know, like every morning you meditated. Your diet was a big part. Their physical activity was huge. You really didn't have a choice. I mean, I suppose you could get out of it if you wanted, but like they were really big on exercise, and it's just interesting. The combination of, you know, therapies, drugs, and more holistic methods is interesting to me.
Well, probably the most like interesting to me as far as like mental health and holistic is what you were saying at the beginning, which was the gut, right?
Yeah.
You were talking about your gut has been kind of messed up.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a huge connection, because as they start to like discover more about like the microbiome, and that starts to kind of come more mainstream, they put more money into research, like they find this connection between the gut and the brain, because there's a nerve called the vagus nerve that runs between the gut and the brain. And it's 90% of the serotonin that ends up in the brain starts in the gut, you know?
Yeah.
Now, I mean, if you grew up with mental health problems, then I mean, you know, there's probably preceding issues before that. But
Right.
it's like for a lot of people, it's like as you get older and the diet is kind of more polluted.
Yeah.
Really, because our food's polluted.
Right.
Everything's processed. Everything has fluoride. Everything has chemicals. You know, it's like more and more people are going to experience this stuff, because if you know, like with issues like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, it's like there's certain bacteria that literally control the way you think. You know, the bacteria will literally control you to eat sugar, and you're like, why can't I stop eating sugar? And it's because there's a bacteria in your gut that's like, eat more sugar, and it just so happens to also be the same bacteria that prevents serotonin from going into your brain, and is what makes people feel, you know, deal with depression and anxiety and these different issues. So yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, for a lot of people, it's like diet has to be, you know, part of the solution.
And it's frustrating for me because like I never had any gut issues, and then all of a sudden I'm taking these medicines that do have side effect, you know, known side effects of nausea and you know, stomach pain.
Yeah,
and so these medicines that are curing me are hurting my stomach, you know, which is a really interesting thing, because I mean, my whole life, I never had stomach issues. I had a very healthy, you know, digestive, and my stomach never hurt, and I felt great and all that. And then all of a sudden, I'm feeling better because of these medicines or whatever, because of time or because of the ECT, whatever it was, I'm feeling better, but these medicines are hurting my stomach.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing, because I don't know what can really be done about that. I mean, I'm going to go see a holistic doctor that a friend recommended, but I don't know if there's much to be done, because it's not a natural lack of any one thing. It's I know the cause. It's that I'm taking this medicine that explicitly tells you it very well might make you nauseous all the time.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't know what we can do about that, but I'm going to see if there's something.
As far as your gut, something that I would, you know, recommend is, if you ever tried like hydrochloric acid.
No.
So the stomach acid.
Yeah.
So basically, like, the biggest problem with digestive issues is it starts in the stomach, because most people don't have enough stomach acid, because it's kind of complicated, but it's like nervous system, fight or flight. If you're stressed, you don't make enough stomach acid. Right. Food doesn't get broken down in your stomach, and then it just wreaks havoc in your gut, which, especially if you're on medication, it's probably, like you said, it's doing some damage to your gut.
Well, here's what's interesting. I don't have any digestive issues.
Okay.
In terms of using the bathroom, anything like that, no trouble. It's just a pain and a
stomach
nausea.
Pain.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it could be. The gut is so complicated. But you know, for me, like, it's because I've been working with like more clients, and like kind of, you know, trying to help them out with different health issues that range a lot of different things. A lot of these issues do start in the gut, like immune issues, mental issues. I mean, because it controls everything. The immune system's on there. So because I don't have the qualifications to be like, oh, you have IBS, you take these medications. I'm just like, you know, what is the most simplistic, you know, way to just start the right direction of movement? And it's because a lot of people just don't have the stomach acid, you know what I mean? It's because you're not and it might not just be the medication, it might be the way that you might have stomach, you might have bacteria or food in there it's just not going through the right way. And so when the medication gets down there, it starts to interact with all that. You know what I mean? So for a lot of people, there's this doctor, it's called Why Stomach Acid is Good or something. And basically that's what he was finding, was like people have these stomach problems because they're just not making enough stomach acid. And it's a thing in society where there's $1 billion industry about eliminating stomach acid with, like, you know, the antacids, the Prilosec, and all this stuff. They're like, oh, you know, you have heartburn, you have too much stomach acid.
Yeah.
And it's actually the complete opposite.
You don't have enough.
You don't have enough.
Yeah.
And when you, like, a lot of people eat too fast, or they eat like looking at their phones. Like if you eat stressed out, that's what like lowers your stomach acid.
Yeah.
So not to say that like that's what you have, but
Oh, it's worth trying. I mean,
it's an interesting direction to look at, you know?
What about probiotics? Is that an avenue worth exploring?
Yeah, it's also kind of a scammy avenue.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bullshit out there.
Yeah.
But I think the safest way to go is if you can get your hands on like some good sauerkraut or some like probiotic yogurt.
Yeah.
You know, the pills, it's just so weird with the pills. Like, you don't know who's making it, where it's coming from, how it's packaged. But yeah, I mean, that's like the big thing. The only problem with probiotics is if you've got fucked up bacteria that's wreaking havoc in your gut, you feed that too with the probiotics.
Right. Okay.
So that's why they say like a high fiber diet's good, because it's like the prebiotics, you know, so you feed, it's just a different mechanism. Like the probiotics put the bacteria in there, the prebiotics feed the bacteria. So, you know, if you eat like starchy, like vegetables like kale, broccoli, those sorts of things, cauliflower, you know, that stuff's good for it. But I mean, I jam on sauerkraut. Like I crush sauerkraut pretty hard, you know. I don't do it for any other reason other than I love it.
Yeah.
But it does keep me straight too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Interesting.
And good fats is huge. Yeah. Like grass-fed butter, coconut oil are like the two big ones.
Really?
That's another thing, because we live in like a low-fat society. Yeah. And so people supplement the low fat with high carbohydrates, sugar. You know?
So how are you taking in coconut oil? Are you putting it on something, or are you
can do it a million ways.
Eating a spoonful, or like what are you doing?
The best way to do it, to be honest with you, is if you like grill up some vegetables, right? Like if you grill up some like kale, some broccoli, some cauliflower, and then you like put the coconut oil on top of that, you get the fat, and then you get the fat soluble vitamins. Okay. Because if you're not taking in fat, like you could eat all the greens in the world, you're not getting the vitamin A, D, E, and K. Yeah. And those are huge for, I mean, basically everything. Right. Vitamin C, vitamin B, I mean, that's a whole other story. But like those 4 vitamins people are deficient in, because we're just not telling people to eat fat. We're like, oh, fat's bad. Fat's going to give you a heart attack. Yeah. And so everyone's like, oh, well, I'll eat more bagels and croissants and, you know, sugar. Everyone's eating breakfast cereal. And it's like, no, you should be eating eggs. You want cholesterol, you know? That's the other thing, cholesterol, right? It's like everyone's like, don't eat cholesterol, but you actually want cholesterol. Like that's actually good for your, it's good for your brain, it's good for your cells. The outer part of your cell is made of cholesterol, you know? It's a touchy subject, but it's like, but if you, I mean, you could just take a shot of coconut oil. Yeah. You could just be like, fuck it, just take it a shot. Sometimes, I mean, I have grass-fed butter. I'll just take a little spoon of it and get it down there.
Now, what are your thoughts? Because I've been gaining weight. Part of it's the medication. Part of it's because I let my diet go a little bit. But after the holidays, my plan is to go back to my my previous sort of diet when I was working out, when I was lifting a lot of weights, where the staple, really what I ate for almost 75% of my meals was chicken breast, some green vegetable like broccoli or kale, mostly broccoli or kale, sometimes asparagus, and then brown rice. Mm-hmm. Like that was, I would eat that for lunch and dinner almost every day.
Yeah, dude, I know that diet.
With like, and I'd eat oatmeal usually for breakfast. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that diet? What's missing? What's lacking in that diet? And what's like, how do I take that diet and make it better?
So I personally think, just in like what I've been learning in the last year, I think the biggest problem, I shouldn't say the biggest problem, but I think one of the most overrated foods is chicken breast. Really? I lived off chicken breast for years. Yeah. And I was chunky. I had bad breath. Right. You know, I had stomach issues. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, you could just look at the association of the correlation between how much chicken people eat in this country and the amount of obesity and all the disease. Yeah. They just so happen to go up together. Right. There's a million reasons why. Not to say that chicken's evil, but you just want fat. you want fat in your diet, and you want to be able to break it down. So because the fatty acids, I mean, they charge everything. They're for your cells. They're just overall just better nutrition.
So would you say so if I'm like a guy who I have trouble moderating my diet unless I make it almost consistent to the point of boredom.
Right.
That's the way I deal with eating healthy. I eat the same thing over and over and over again. And I don't mind it. Like, I just find what I like. So what, I don't imagine it. I can eat red meat every night, right?
No, you should.
Oh, I should.
Red meat's much better.
That would be okay to do that every night if I had
Absolutely.
Like a steak or I don't know. What would you recommend?
I mean, ideally, you want like good sourced organ meat. Like ground beef, if you can get like grass-fed, grass-finished, obviously is like the gold standard.
Yeah.
It's a little pricey and it's hard to find, but I mean, you can go to farmers markets. There's actually in New York City, there's this like really shady company called Uttermilk. They deliver it like out of like a white van, and it's kind of like under, cloak and dagger and all that. But red meat has fat, it has B vitamins, and that's what you want. Like that's going to actually help your nervous system.
And that's not, because it's sort of been drilled into our heads. I feel like that. Oh, red meat every day. What are you, crazy? You're going to get a heart attack. Yeah,
right.
That's not the case.
It's not true.
Okay.
It's not. Well, so I shouldn't say that. It's individual, right? That's the thing that's like lost in the whole debate. It's like, red meat for most people is great. So, I mean, there's the carnivore diet. People are eating nothing but red meat every single day.
Right.
And I would never recommend that for anybody. Right. Although if you listen to someone like Jordan Peterson, he'd be like, that's what cured my depression.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But I would it would be completely irresponsible for me to say eat red meat every single day. But if you ate it like 3-4 times a week, if you ate like steak can be kind of pricey, but if you can swing it, go for it. I like some ground beef and make little like burgers or like some ground beef stir fries or whatever.
Yeah.
If you do some of that, grill it not in oil like vegetable oil or canola oil or olive oil, but get like tallow or butter and coat the pan with that. I mean that good fat's like it's so good for you.
It's interesting. So butter better than oil.
Million times better.
Wow.
Like if you like a lot of people cook with coconut oil or olive oil, right?
And that's always what I've cooked with, really.
Yeah. So the thing is, when you heat up the olive oil, you make the fats bad. You basically rancidify it. So when you eat anything cooked in bad oil, it's just poison you're just putting in your body.
It's so interesting because that's always how I've cooked my vegetables.
Yeah.
That's how I've cooked everything. Really.
It's how everybody does it.
Olive oil has always been my go-to.
Yeah.
Interesting.
If you're going to cook with oil, coconut oil is the best oil to cook with.
Right.
But I would say skip the whole thing, cook with butter.
Right.
Even if you're like nervous about it, because like when I first started doing it, I was like, this is kind of weird, but it makes everything taste better.
I mean, that's the thing. Whenever I cook breakfast, I use butter. Eggs, I use butter. So it's not crazy. Interesting.
But it's like, to me, like as far as like the diet that if you just look at the numbers and you're like cases of chronic disease and what food keeps going up, it's the vegetable oils. And it's the animal fat going down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, it's a leap to be like cause and effect, but it's also like, maybe there's something there. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then when you look at it, it's like all the B vitamins, the fat soluble vitamins, like those are so important. Like if you get like vitamin A, people are deficient in vitamin A, vitamin D. That's a mood, vitamin D is a hormone more than it is a vitamin,
right.
And it controls everything. The cholesterol is the base of sex hormones. Right. You know what I mean? And it's for your brain. I mean, it's just good for
more
everything.
Cholesterol will increase your sex drive. Essentially,
it could.
Essentially,
it could. Yeah, yeah. It definitely for guys, for women especially.
Yeah.
Because it's the base of progesterone. There's a whole cascade of things that happen when you get it. But I mean, generally, like when I think about my life as like a low fat vegan to now, it's like now the amount of energy I have, the amount of like clarity in my mind, the amount of drive I have to do stuff. It's like I don't want to say it's night and day. because I did feel good when I was on low fat,
Yeah.
but it definitely felt like something was missing. Like I was
Right.
hungry a lot.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
I binged eat a lot. I don't
Yeah.
binge eat really anymore. You know, especially if because I mean it's hard not to binge eat because
Yeah.
especially if you're low fat, it's like you're just hungry all the time.
Right.
And the fat like actually makes it so you're not hungry.
Right.
You're like, oh, okay. If you just took a shot of coconut oil, you would be like, okay, I feel okay.
Right.
You know, if you
Right.
eat like a couple hard-boiled eggs like randomly in the day, the egg yolks.
Sorry, I did not silence my phone irresponsibly.
How dare you?
I apologize.
But yeah, you get the good fats going. But the big thing is, I would also say beets. Beets are huge.
I love beets.
Beets are very good.
I love beets.
Beets are great because they stimulate your gallbladder, and the gallbladder, it's like if I'm like gonna specialize in something, it would be the gallbladder.
Yeah.
Because it's the most just overlooked organ in the body, but it's so important because it lets out all the bile, it breaks down all the fat, and people are getting their gallbladders removed because the doctors are telling them, they're like, oh, your gallbladder, you got gallstones, so you don't really need the gallbladder.
Yeah.
And there could be nothing further from the truth.
Right.
And you know, if you have a well-functioning gallbladder, it's like, I hate to say it, but you'll see it in the toilet. Like the poops
Right.
are amazing, you know, if the
Yeah.
bile's working all together. But again, it's like a system. Like everything has to like.
It's what's so funny about my sort of bout or my history of mental illness is it's very ironic. I don't know if irony is the right word, but like I've enjoyed fantastic physical health in like all other aspects of my life. Like never had any problem, never had any digestive problems, never had any like muscle problem. No issues except my brain, you know, like, which is a little bit ironic. Like I've always been very healthy in terms of, I'm slightly overweight, but other than that, in terms of like whenever they do testing or whatever, everything looks good, everything comes out good, everything. I have never have digestive issues, but I just happen to be crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, crazy
It's a
people
trade-off.
Crazy people look good, man. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Well, cool, man. We've been going for a little bit. So
Well, thanks for having me, man.
yeah, I'm glad you were able to come. You're very, thanks for being vulnerable and
sure.
and talking through the whole thing.
Sure.
You have some hilarious comedy out there on the internet you can find.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best place to find me regularly would be the Rad Dude Cast, another podcast that I'm with Anthony DeVito and Greg Stone, two other funny comedians. And then, if you don't mind me saying, they could follow me on Instagram at AirBud, EYREBUD, Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah. Follow Brendan. Hilarious stuff. Watch his stuff on YouTube. You got some shows around.
Yeah, I will be, what do I have coming up? I'll be the 23rd of December. I'll be in Rhode Island at the Pelham, which is a bar. You can, I think, contact the bar for tickets. And then December 28th through 31st, I'll be at the Joke Joint in Minneapolis for some special New Year's shows. So come out and celebrate. It'll be really fun. I guess St. Paul, technically, not Minneapolis. I apologize.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thanks for coming out, Brendan.
Thanks for having me. This
was
is
great.
really illuminate. This was like a talk I would have liked to have even if we weren't recording.
Yeah, for sure.
I just wanted to learn some things. So
Yeah,
this
man.
was good. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Okay. Thanks,
All right.
man.